Welcome to another episode of Yeah Sports Talk. And welcome to week 10 of 2024 college football season. That's right. 9 weeks of college action is under us. We start seeing the key conference matchups to really solidify the pecking order in the conferences and possibly in the pecking order of the first ever 12-team college football playoff. Please note that when you do the college football playoff, the top 5 ranked conference champions will get to AQ with the top 4 getting that first round bye. Then the remaining 7 ranked teams plus the other conference champion then get ranked accordingly with the top 4 ranked teams getting the home site, home campus game, or a site of their choosing, which can lead to see where a lot of teams kind of land off. So like Notre Dame, if they make it to the playoffs and they're ranked high enough, they could have that first round game in South Bend, but they can't get that first round bye because they have no conference tie-in, and that's probably could hurt them in the long run. But let's look over last week's action of I actually did 11 games. I threw in a Friday night special because that one I think had to be highlighted due to the nature of that game. And I went surprisingly well. I started off bad and ended bad, but everything else was the apple filling of the apple pie as I went 9-2 for week 9, which I was quite impressed with. There was a couple of games that actually shocked me, one for how close they were and some for how egregious the scores were. Let's start off with Friday night, Boise State and UNLV, a key Mountain West showdown, and probably a showdown we might see later on in the year in the Mountain West Championship between Boise State and UNLV. I picked UNLV because it was just one of these teams that I've always not picked them, and when I not picked them, they end up winning. And it's just one of these teams that I always, it's like, okay, I won't do this game because I always pick them wrong, but I do it anyways because they always are the key matchup. And once again, they were there, and Genty is actually padding his Heisman stats. Had another 128 yards on the ground, only 1 touchdown. But it was a good back and forth matchup. I mean, UNLV was up early. Then Boise State took charge that second quarter at halftime, led 20-10 at the half. Then UNLV came out of the locker room, came storming back in. But in the end, Boise State was able to escape UNLV with a 29-24 victory. I think no one's surprised with that outcome in Eugene between the Illini and the Ducks. I certainly wasn't. Actually, I thought Illini would probably put more points on the board than they did, but I was not surprised that the Ducks beat them. Penn State struggled against Wisconsin. I didn't think it would be this close, but Penn State was able to squeak out in that fourth quarter. But losing Alar could hamper the Nittany Lions further down the line, but they did leave Madison with a 28-13 victory. Brian Day and the Buckeyes escaped an upset bid by Matt Rule and the Cornhuskers of Nebraska, escaping their upset try, 21-17. Texas had a scare in Vanderbilt. Once again, Vanderbilt hanging with the big dogs at SEC. Remember, they knocked off Alabama. And Ewers looked a little out of sorts in this game. I mean, he didn't still end up with 3 touchdowns, 288, but there's a lot of time frames he did look kind of out of place like he did against Georgia. But the scheme by Texas offense to really get them going in the defense stepping up when they had to was key in the Longhorns escaping Music City 27-24. Out in College Station, all the signs were pointing towards LSU, and I'm like, don't count A&M. Yes, they were trailing 17-7 at half. A&M went, hold my Shinerbach, and just went storming back. 14 unanswered points in that second half, or that third quarter, that just gave A&M the lead, and once they took the lead, that was it. Nussmeier couldn't recover from that one. It doesn't matter what they did. You can look at, the Brian Kelly's face on LSU sideline. He just couldn't understand why his team could not get going. A&M crowd was electric, and they were able to knock off LSU to remain the only undefeated team in SEC play. So technically, if the playoffs are ranked right now, Texas A&M is your conference champion. Still a lot more games to play to find out who goes in there, and they might have to face off Georgia and Atlanta. But Aggie fans have a lot of things to look forward to, and we'll see how things kind of progress from there. But time will tell. And then we head over to New York City, where Navy was playing host to Notre Dame, and 6 turnovers by Navy led to their demise. This is a team that's been racking up points, but of course they really haven't played anyone of serious contention. And I really thought this game was going to be a lot closer because this is the history between these two programs. They always play very tight. Navy always tries to upset Notre Dame year in, year out. But to have 6 turnovers, that was the key to the victory, as Notre Dame routed Navy 51-14. No shocker in Tuscaloosa. I was just more shocked it was a shutout than anything else. SMU and Duke was a huge showdown. I think marred by some calls, no calls. SMU play was definitely very sus because Jennings and SMU offense were doing a lot of turnovers to keep Duke in the game. Duke were capitalizing on this. The game ended up going to overtime, where SMU ended up scoring first, and then Duke had it. They scored, but then they decided to go for 2. Didn't make it. That was it. SMU escapes Durham 28-27. And then a game that, because all the other games I've covered so far, besides that, Boise State UNLV game, were all victories. This last one was my last loss. That's between Cincinnati and Colorado. Once again, Colorado's is one of these teams that if I pick them, they lose. If I don't pick them, they win. It's a weird scenario when it comes to the Buffs and Coach Deion Sanders and his son, Shedeur Sanders. But Shedeur Sanders had a productive game, 323 yards in the air, 2 touchdowns. As the Buffalo's defense was the key in this aspect, which I knew it was going to be a factor. But I didn't know how much Travis Hunter was going to play on both sides of the ball. He ended up having 153 yards, catching two touchdowns. But it was just a constant defensive barrage against the Bearcats, where Buffs were up 24-14 at the half. It just never looked back. And completing the victory 34-23 to go 4-1 conference play, 6-2 overall. Like I said, that's the highlights of last week to my games. Now it's time to head to my poll that I do, all based on a formula I've implemented. You get so many points for your victories. You actually get negative points for your losses. You get some points for an overtime loss, points for strength of schedule, strength of victory. Add it all together, divided by games played, rack and stack accordingly. So now, at number 25, I have Ole Miss, kind of coming back in the polls, 6-2. They were previously ranked 36 in my poll previously. Mizzou hangs around, as well as the Illini, after their losses to Alabama and Oregon, respectively. Of course, everyone kind of figured they would lose. No one really thought they would get blown out the way they did, but they all figured they would lose, dropping 19 to 15, respectively. Making it into the top 25 is Boise State, coming in from 28, so just hanging outside. They're up there at 6-1. LSU drops from 13 to 21. Army moved up despite not playing. Moved from 25 to 20. Colorado returns to the poll with a huge jump, going from 29 to 19, also being 6-2. Wazoo makes an appearance, once 26, now at 18. 17, this is where Tennessee maintains their position. 16.5 Alabama, being 6-2, the highest ranked, I think, 2-loss team in this poll, moving it from 21 to 16. SMU up 1. Ohio State climbs up to 14 from 18. Now, I know a lot of the other national polls have Ohio State in the top 5. K-State actually dropped a position from their surviving the upset bid by their in-state rival, Kansas. Clemson actually dropped to the number 12. Georgia also dropped to number 11. That's because of these programs didn't play, but expect things to change eventually. Texas up 1 to number 10. A&M climbs to number 9, coming from 14. And the Irish maintain number 8. At number 7, this is where we have the surprise Indiana Hoosiers. 8-0, still maintain that 7th position. At 5 and 6, you see a swap from the previous week. Now that Pitt moves to 5, Miami down to 6 from what it was previously. Number 4, still have Iowa State. 2-3 ended up doing a little tango and switcheroo. BYU is now at 3, while Penn State's 2. They were switched around last week. And then you'll see Penn State having a huge game coming up this weekend will determine where they stay or go higher. And maintaining number 1 is the Ducks. Well, I'm going to go ahead and dive into Week 10's game. I'll have 10 games this weekend. But let's go ahead and kick off with a huge top 5 showdown in the Big Ten. Here we go again, another big-time top 5 matchup in the polls. Early in the season, see how teams can recover. You'll have the 6-1 Buckeyes of Ohio State heading to Happy Valley to take on the undefeated Nittany Lions. Now, this one should be a classic matchup. Unfortunately, Franklin has a very bad habit of losing to Ohio State the vast majority of the times he plays them, as well as Michigan. I don't see much difference. The question marks around Allard could be a concern for the Nittany Lions, whether or not he actually plays this game or not. And this is one of the games that Ohio State needs to get back in there, get back in the horse to hopefully see other teams battle each other out, and they can get up there to the championship game. But Ohio State had that huge scare against Nebraska, and that's going to hurt them. Penn State's defense is not a pushover. They will hamper Ohio State all game. There's not going to be a offensive showdown like they had against the Ducks when they have fell short. But also Penn State, the past 2 weeks, have also struggled, and go into overtime to beat USC, struggled against Wisconsin. So both these teams are limping into this matchup. And if you look at other matchups recently, especially in conference play by the Nittany Lions, you do see a pattern of some struggle the vast majority of the game, but then able to close it out at the end. In Ohio State, you have a different story with Nebraska being the oddball in terms of offensive production. I have a feeling this should be Ohio State's not going to get in the 30s like they have the previous 3 conference matchups. They're going to be in the high 20s. I think Penn State's going to be about the mid-20s. I think Ohio State's going to come in there with a way to win. Brian Day has a good time playing against Penn State, so I don't see any issues with this one. Analytics have Ohio State winning by 62%. The spread has a 4-point advantage for the Buckeyes. I just kind of mentioned a 28-24 victory going to Buckeyes. And a huge matchup in ACC play as the 6-2 Blue Devils head down to South Beach to take on the undefeated Hurricanes of the U. And this should be a phenomenal game. I mean, Ward is also staking his claim for Heisman consideration as well. I already mentioned Genty from Boise State, the running back there. He definitely should get his name on that finalist list. I think Ward is the exact same thing. He should have his name on that finalist list. In a very crowded ACC right now with 4 teams undefeated in conference play, which includes Miami. Duke on the outside looking in. This is definitely a game they need to win to get in. That loss to SMU really stung to them. But Miami is just a different animal. This offense clicks. I mean, the scare they had in Cal really hampered them in the Cal and the experience, the scare they had against the Hokies as well. But those are scares. They still went with the W. In close games, Duke loses. Georgia Tech, SMU. North Carolina's the exception to the rule. But I think with conference play being as it is, I have no quorums with Miami right now. Analytics have them at 91%. The spread it has by 21. I'm not 100% sure it would be a 21-point victory. I do think it's going to be closer to that Cal-Virginia Tech game where Miami is going to struggle against Duke, but then break it out towards the end. So I do think probably be like a 17, 16-point spread. But I am getting to Miami. I might take Duke for the points. Then over to SEC play, where we have the 6-2 Ole Miss Rebels heading to Fayetteville to take on the 5-3 Razorbacks in a clash in the SEC between two lost programs in SEC play. In a way, the conference is kind of set up. They need this win to stay within the hunt for the SEC championship. And that's a really, really interesting look at. And Green has shown his ability to make some good passes, but he has thrown a lot of interceptions, and it's almost a one-for-one trade-off. It's like a 1.3 to a 1. I mean, it's eerily close, and that's something Arkansas cannot have. They cannot have turnovers against Ole Miss. Ole Miss will take advantage of that day and night. But Ole Miss has kind of struggled a little bit the past 2 weeks. Technically 3 of the last 4 games they struggled. I mean, they had that loss against Kentucky. That really shook the boat. That overtime loss to LSU, which I don't really think really shook them too much, but definitely dented their conference chances. And a win against Oklahoma was not pretty either. They did come out with a victory. In terms of Razorbacks, I mean, they got blown out by LSU, but they upset Tennessee. A&M squeaked past them. They struggled a bit with Auburn. So Arkansas is being a little inconsistent with their play, so it lets me, it kind of looks different. I like Dart in this matchup. I think he's going to have a good game. I think Parrish should have a decent game as well. We'll just kind of see how the aspects play. Ole Miss needs this win to stay within the hunt for that playoff bid. I think you might have a 2-loss team in the playoff anyways. And Ole Miss is trying to make sure their name is still in consideration, but they need some good wins against some good teams. This is a must-win, I think, for Ole Miss. Analytics have them at 74%. They have a 6 points advantage in the spread. I like that as well. I am going with Ole Miss. And then we head over to Champaign, where the 6-2 Fighting Illini play host to the 5-3 Golden Gophers. Both these programs are 3-2 in conference play. And how this conference is kind of set up, they need this win to kind of maintain a puncher's chance of getting in. I mean, yeah, you have a 3 team sitting on top with 1 team with 1 loss. Those are your big 4 right now. And then you see that a huge grouping of 2-loss programs, which include these 2. So they need this to kind of, stick around. The way Illinois played against Oregon, they were just out of their element. They couldn't do much like they did against Penn State. Against really good teams, they struggle. Michigan, they manhandled. Struggled against Purdue, which was a kind of shocker. So to edge out Nebraska. You look at the Minnesota side, they struggle against UCLA. Struggle against USC. Lost to Michigan. Lost to Iowa. So they're actually on a 3-game conference win streak right now, which the momentum is with the Gophers. And Brosmeyer has decent stats. Over 1,700 yards passing, 12 touchdowns with 4 picks. Altmaier has pretty good numbers himself. Over 600 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, 3 picks. As you know, which running back has a better running attack? That's Taylor. Which defense do you trust the most? And that's going to be a huge factor. Can that Illini defense show back up like they did against Michigan, which is a swarm defense, and just smothered Michigan's offense? I think that can actually happen. Right now, analytics have Minnesota at 54% with a 1.5 spread advantage. I don't know. The Illini, one of these teams, I think people are kind of looking on the radar a bit. I mean, they are ranked, so they are getting some respect. But I think in terms of analytics and whatnot, that they're underestimating the Illini. I will give it to Illinois, edging out Minnesota by a 2-point margin. This ACC match that I was not originally going to cover, and that's the Hokies heading to the Dome to take on the Orange. And the Hokies coming in there with 1 conference loss, sitting outside the Big Four undefeated programs. Syracuse, 500, right now tied with like Georgia Tech and Duke and Wake to try to get into that consideration for ACC championship game. Now, if you look at Syracuse, they were dismantled by Pitt. They did edge out UNLV, which, it's not a conference game, but, it's a game you have to actually hang your hat on there. And you look at Virginia Tech, I mean, the struggle against Miami, ended up losing. Outgunned BC, outpaced Georgia Tech in the Techno Bowl. And it's just one of these unique aspects. McCord being a Ohio State transfer with the Syracuse, it actually has good numbers. Almost 2,500 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, about 11 picks, and that's a key aspect that has to happen. If Syracuse needs a puncher's chance, they need to eliminate the turnovers. And that's what's been killing them this season. They can't be having freebie plays. And for the Hokies, they got to turn to Tutton, 950 yards on the ground with 12 touchdowns. The offense is built on that run game, but that's not the only thing to worry about. Drones, decent numbers in the air with 1,400 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, but also 5 picks. That's another aspect they're going to have to look at as well in terms of that. The spread right now is 3.5 for Virginia Tech, and analytics has it at 71% chance for the Hokies. This leads me to believe this could be a Syracuse upset. I don't want to go that way, but I have a feeling that the Hokies will be able to escape, but I do have a feeling it might be closer to 3.5. I do think Syracuse will make this a game and could come out victorious. I think this one for me is a toss-up. This is really going to come down to who makes the less mistakes. And unfortunately, McCord has the disadvantage in this aspect because he throws a lot more picks. And I'll give it to Virginia Tech winning on a game-ending interception. There's a bold statement there, but Hokies. Now time to head to the Big House, where the 5-3 Wolverines play host to undefeated Oregon. And this is going to be huge. Michigan is definitely not the team of last year. I think I've mentioned this quite a few times. It's been mentioned across many platforms. And I think this is well expected after winning a national championship and all those students leave and the coaching staff gets a major overhaul. And they've had some interesting games. I mean, they had the comeback win against USC, comeback win against Minnesota, struggle against Michigan State that turned a little violent. manhandled by the Illini. Washington outplayed them. So there's definitely question marks with the Wolverines, things that we have to look at. And you look at Oregon, they're really starting to push away from that early season missteps where they almost lost to Boise State and Idaho, to go on this tear afterwards to cover the spread until they hit that buzzsaw. The Buckeyes was able still to escape with a 1-point victory and then just crush the next two opponents. I mean, they decimated the Illini, the same Illini team that physically manhandled the Wolverines. I think the Ducks will have no issues. I think Gabriel should have a very good time in the Big House. He has over 2,300 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 5 picks. Warren right now throws more interceptions than touchdowns on a 2-1 margin, 6-3. Mullings, decent numbers, almost 700 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns. James for the Ducks, 800 yards, 8 touchdowns. The running attack is virtually even. It's going to be that defense is going to have to really step up in quarterback play. I think Ducks have the advantage in both of those. Analytics, 79%. The spread, 15.5, all in favor of Oregon. I would question Oregon covering the spread. I think I will this game as well. I think it's going to be part of more of a 14.5 spread. I think the spread's a little too high. So with that being said, I'm still giving the win to Oregon regardless, but I don't think it's going to be 5-15. I think it's going to be a little bit smaller than that. Not by much, though. I think it will be a double-digit win, but Ducks all day long. Then we head out to Iowa State and the undefeated Cyclones, and they play host to the 5-2 Red Raiders. Now, Texas Tech had a must-win game basically at Fort Worth when they took on TCU and ended up losing in the end, because now they have 2 losses that really puts them behind the 8 ball, because you have the 2 undefeated teams, then the 2 one-loss teams, and right now they're tied in there with TCU, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Arizona State, with all those 2 losses, and they're behind TCU on that because of the head-to-head matchups. But if that happens to be the case, Tech's going to be finding himself outside looking in. And the way Iowa State's been playing, they're doing really good. I mean, they struggle against UCF, but so did BYU. So credit to UCF having a good team, but not stepping up to the plate per se. But besides that game and Houston game, and the last 5 games for the Cyclones, it's been pretty easy for Beck and Hansen to really lead this team. I mean, Beck, 1,700 yards passing, 11 TDs, only 5 picks. Hansen, almost 400 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns. And for the Red Raiders, they've had some really close calls. I mean, a 3-point win against Cincinnati, 6 points against the Wildcats of Arizona. Then they got outgunned by Baylor, lost in a squeaker to TCU. So there's definitely issues with the Raiders. Morton still having a very productive year. Over 2,000 yards passing, 17 touchdowns, 3 picks. Definitely better stats than Beck. Brooks, better running attack. He has 925 yards with 9 TDs. So you compare those two, that's how it looks like. The Raiders look like to be the bigger advantage. But Iowa State's playing a lot better. They have they're looking into trying to do something with this team to try to win out, and analytics has them by 82%. The spread right now is 15.5 in favor of Iowa State. I would push back on that immensely. They're overlooking Texas Tech. If they don't shoot themselves in the foot, Texas Tech will make this a game. But I do have a feeling the Raiders will make some bonehead plays like they did against TCU, which will really hamper them. But I do think Iowa State will end up squeaking out a victory. I'm looking like a similar game like they did against UCF, a 3-point victory, but I am getting to the Cyclones to win at home. Then we had the Death Valley down there in South Carolina with the Clemson Tigers playing host to the Cardinals of Louisville. This is going to be another key ACC clash. As Clemson, part of that huge bottleneck of teams on top, all undefeated with 4 of them, and Louisville right behind them with 2 losses, but they're the top team with 2 losses right now. And if you looked at the aspects of the Tigers' past few games, there's been some games, they're kind of question marked, and they struggled a bit against Virginia, but still ended up winning by 17. They struggled against Florida State, but still ended up winning by 16. So there's some games they're not winning by a lot, but they are winning by a good margin. And you look at Louisville, struggling against BC. I think everyone kind of struggled against BC. Got outgunned by Miami. I think everyone saw that one coming. Edged out Virginia. Got both SMU and Notre Dame. Went a little bit too much for them. Of course, I called both those losses. So, Saw definitely has to overcome some of his letdowns. Over 2,300 yards passing, 20 TDs, and 5 picks. He has had phenomenal stats, but so has Klubnik. 1,800 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 3 picks. So you get more yards with Saul, but you get less picks with Klubnik. I think I'll take the less picks because that means your offense is not stalling out with bad throws. Running attack-wise, virtually even. Brown, 650 with 6 touchdowns. Maffa, 280 with 6 touchdowns. So it's which defense do you trust the most? And I kind of believe a little bit more in Clemson's. Right now, analytics have them at 67% with 11-point spread. I'll push back on the spread, but I think Louisville will make this close. It's going to be probably the closest game that the Clemson Tigers will have, but I think they'll find themselves winning in the end, probably by 3, maybe even an overtime victory. But I'll take Clemson for the victory, Louisville for the points. They have a Big Ten matchup in Iowa City as the Hawkeyes play host to the Badgers in a nice rivalry game. And actually, a bowl bid could be possibly on the line because this will give them their 6th victory and bowl eligibility. This is another Big Ten showdown between teams that definitely needs to stay in there, much like the Illinois-Minnesota game. Michigan's also in the hunt, but they're going to find themselves losing more likely against Oregon. So that means Iowa and Wisconsin needs to keep pace with the Illini if they end up winning, or the Gophers, depending on who wins that game. To still maintain hunt within that top pecking order, because we'll start seeing a change with Ohio State and Penn State going at it. So a lot of things are playing the line. Wisconsin played very good against Penn State. There just wasn't enough in the end. They had that disappointing loss against the Trojans. But then they decimated Rutgers when Rutgers was flying pretty high. Iowa had disappointment against Michigan State. Were blown out by Ohio State, but they have huge wins against Washington and Minnesota. So a lot of interesting look come into this showdown. Locke right now having decent numbers, almost 1,300 yards passing, 17 5 picks. That's going to hamper him in the end. McNamara, excuse me. About similar numbers, 1,000 yards, 6 TDs, 5 picks. So both quarterback play has to be near perfect for these teams to kind of win. But these teams also rely on their defenses a lot. They also rely on the running game. For the Badgers, Walker, over 600 yards, 10 TDs. But Johnson, for the Hawkeyes, is already a 1,000-yard rusher with 15. If Johnson can break open and get these nice runs, get another 100-yard, maybe 150 yards on the ground, give him his 2 touchdowns, they'll give McNamara enough opportunity to possibly maybe get another touchdown. But I think Locke would definitely keep this game close if Iowa can't maintain their secondary, as they've shown a few games here and there, that they are susceptible to huge blowouts. Michigan State, Ohio State, the prime 2 examples. They caught the over 30 points, technically 32 points over. And Wisconsin is capable of doing that, but they haven't consistently. They only had just 2 games where they were over 42 points. That was against Rutgers and Purdue. Taking on teams with decent defenses, they struggle. That thing is going to be a case here because right now analytics has it at 58 to Hawkeyes, and a 3.5-point advantage to Iowa. I kind of like that. I do think it's going to be a very close showdown between these two. I will take Iowa to win at home. And then the last game on the docket, heading back to the ACC play between 2 undefeated conference members right now. Pitt, who's undefeated overall, taking on SMU, who's 7-1. Like I said, both are undefeated in conference play, looking to see who can maintain control or who could be sole possession. Because, well, if Miami and Clemson both lose, then they will be the number 1 team in the ACC. So a lot riding on this one. Looking at these past few games, Pittsburgh, I've called the Cardiac Cats. They've had a few games that are very close. They had to come from behind. That West Virginia game, Louisville, Cal, North Carolina had some issues. SMU had some great games. The only one black mark on their docket right now is BYU. I called that one. And they had that squeaked out that win in Durham last week by the skin of their teeth. So this is going to be a huge showdown. I mean, they also had the other big win in Louisville, which I also called. Don't like to toot my own horn, but every so often I get things right, and I like to really highlight that because I get a ton more wrong. But in terms of this game, Jennings right now is looking like he is going to play. There's questions that he might not because of some injuries. But it looks like he could be possibly playing, which is evident in need him because he's a 1,600-yard, almost 600-yard passer, 10 touchdowns, 5 picks. He had a terrible game last week, so he's looking to reassert himself in the SMU offense. Holstein himself, over 1,800 yards, 17 TDs, 5 picks. He was brilliant against the Orange. And they always seem to lead these, as I call them, the Cardiac Cats, into comeback victories that probably shouldn't have. And that's probably one of the reasons why nationally they're not ranked higher, even though they're undefeated in conference. It's because they don't win by stunning fashion. They just win, baby. The old Al Davis motif there. And I think that's one of the reasons why not a lot of people look at them. And they look at SMU, they don't give them a lot of love either. First year in the Power 5, or technically I guess you could say Power 4 now. There's only really 4 conferences to really worry about. They had their issues and haven't really played that big of talent as of yet. So far, I guess you could say they're 2-1 against, those type of programs. So it's going to be a huge test for them. For me, I think the Duke game could be a sign of bad things coming. Because if they can't rebound off of that offensively to limit the turnovers, limit the mistakes, and that's part of the problem was turnovers and penalties were just hampering the Mustangs the entire game. Same thing with Duke. Pitt is one of these teams you have to close out, otherwise they can storm back. And they like doing momentum swings. Right now, everything is pointing towards the Mustangs. They have a 70% advantage in the ESPN analytics. A 7.5-point spread right now. So no love for the Pitt Panthers. And they're trying to hoist SMU up. I get that. I do. For me, I like Pittsburgh in this matchup. It's just I count them out in that River City rivalry, and they made me pay for it. And ever since then, it's been one of these. And I think I count them out in the backyard brawl, too. And they've been living on the edge and winning these games in comeback fashion. And I think this is what's going to take to win against SMU. They're probably going to find themselves down the majority of the game, and they're going to have to do the exact same thing. Probably make a 14 point, score 10 or 14 points in that final, 10 minutes to win the game. And I think Pitt's going to be doing that, squeaking out of Dallas with the victory to remain undefeated, going with Pitt. So let me know down below what you think of the picks. Which one you think I got wrong? Did I want to stretch on two of these? And we're trying to toot my horn too much during this scenario this week. Possibly. But let me know. Let's mix it up in the comments below. If you're still here at the end, you like what I do, you like the ramblings I do, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. It really helps the video out. If you'd like to support this channel, greatly appreciate it. All you do is subscribe. Doesn't cost you a dime. Hit that subscribe button and click that bell icon and turn notifications so you know next time I post any more content on my channel. And I'll see you next time on Chat Sports Talk.